Hello, everyone. Welcome to a community forum on Prop 1. Thank you all for being here. I want to thank our co-sponsors for this event, Planned Parenthood, yes, the Los Angeles LGBT Center, Black Women for Wellness Action Project, and our very own Lucky Fuller for helping to put this really important forum together. Ever since we had the abortion bans coming through, starting with Texas, we held a rally right here in West Hollywood Park to stand with women and have done everything we possibly can legally to help women come to West Hollywood and secure the right to choose for our city. We were actually the first city in America that was pro-choice. And so the city of West Hollywood has always stood for pro-choice and stood for women in many, many ways, and we'll continue to do that. This Prop 1 that's on the ballot is essential. It is essential that everybody goes and votes for Prop 1. Even though California, we are a pro-choice state, we cannot take anything for granted in the environment that we are in America, and slowly losing our democracy. But California is taking a stand to say, no, we will stand with women, which is essential, and we will continue to do that. So thank you all for being here. I want to actually call my colleagues up to say a few words, starting with Councilmember Lindsay Horvath, and then Councilmember John Erickson.
Thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. So important to be having this conversation because we are in a pro-choice city, because we are in a progressive state like California. We know that there's a risk that people will sit this out. They won't get excited about the fact that we are going to enshrine in the Constitution in the state of California the right to make your own decisions about your reproductive health. That is exciting. It's essential. And the fact that it isn't already the case in California just lets us know that there's always more work to be done. It is incredibly important that we continue to fight, that we do all that we can, all that is within our power, and maybe even rewriting the laws to make sure we have even more legal authority to ensure that every pregnant person who wants to access abortion, every person who can become pregnant, who wants any form of reproductive health care, has the right to access it, and every person who can become pregnant also doesn't have anybody telling them what to do or not to do about their reproductive health care. Because we know that that every decision that anyone gets to make about their bodies and their reproductive health is their choice and their choice alone. And that's what this constitutional amendment will do. I know you're going to hear about that tonight and why it is so important for different people, for different groups, and especially for our state to take this leadership role. And I'm grateful that that we have a place like West Hollywood that can be home to a conversation where we can ask the tough questions. There are no dumb questions here, because we hear a lot of people saying, why would we do this? Aren't we already protected? But in fact, this will give us even more rights than we have right now. And at a time where we see the Supreme Court in so many states pushing us backwards, seeing a place that pushes us forwards, that said we are not going back, is exactly what we need in this moment. So thank you for all of our panelists who will lead us in this conversation, make sure everyone gets fired up and ready to go and turns out to vote. And thank you all for being part of this conversation and helping to spread the word yes on Prop 1.
I want to thank the staff, Hernan. Thank you for hosting tonight's conversation, and Yvonne and all of the team, Larissa in the back. Thank you. Thank you to my staff in my day job, Jamie Konerk, for being on the panel. That is, I go to work every day at Planned Parenthood, and I always tell people it's my dream job, because it really is. And so I'm very thankful to each and every one of you for just giving us a little bit of your time today, and to my colleagues for unanimously supporting a yes position as the city on Prop 1. And yesterday when the vice president was in town, yes, it was yesterday already, sorry, it's been a while, she said something that's really, was really prescient for me, and it's that she's talked to 100 world leaders across everywhere, right? You were there. That's right, you were there with me. And she says, when you think about the United States of America holding this line for democracy and autonomy and rights, and then you have autocratic governments look like it's okay to restrict women's dress, restrict women's rights, restrict LGBTQ people's rights. It gives them permission when the United States isn't that shining nation on a hill anymore. And that's why this is important. That's why the work that we're doing is important. And also the piece about Prop 1 enshrining the right to contraceptives is important as well, because we all know they're coming for everything. So I'm so thankful for all of you. And without further ado, step your shine.
Thank you. I also, I apologize. I left out our trans men in my introduction, and it's essential to recognize that Prop 1 will not only protect women, but transgender men who have often been completely invisible and left out. So I just want to make sure that is corrected.
Thank you very much, council members and Mayor Pro Tem. It is that we are here tonight because of the initiative of the City Council and the historic positions the city has always taken in support of people who can get pregnant, because obviously it's not just women, it's also trans men, and we want to address these issues. And tonight we are going to talk about a lot of issues. We are going to talk about issues of inclusivity, issues of exclusion, issues of poverty, access to healthcare, because obviously when we talk about abortion, we also talk about family planning. And SCA1, which then became Prop 1, is about that and so much more. This forum will not just talk about abortion. We're also going to talk about those enemies of women who are also the enemies of LGBT community. They are working also to take away the rights of transgender men as well, and transgender women. So all those are the things that it's important that we talk, and we have a very, very diverse panel. So I'm going to start inviting the panel. I'm going to have a seat, and you'll see, and for those of you who are watching us at home, you can obviously watch it now, or you can watch it later. You can record it, or you can watch it in the reruns on City Channel 10. And it's also streaming on YouTube Live. So without further ado, I'd like to first call Onyema Obiekea to join us, and if you could please. Everybody pay attention to the back of Onyema's shirt. And if you can please tell us your name and your title and the organization you work for.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me beyond the mask? Okay, great. My name is Onyema Obiekea, and I'm a policy analyst with Black Women for Wellness and Black Women for Wellness Action Project, 501c3 and 501c4 sister organizations. We're reproductive justice organizations based in South LA, and we're committed to the empowerment, health, and well-being of Black women and girls. We have the C4 side that's committed to doing this, or securing the health and well-being of Black women and girls through electoral work and advocacy. Yeah. So, yeah.
Good.
Is that it? Is that good?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Glad that you're here. Jamie Kennerk from Planned Parenthood. And also, if you can remind the audience your pronouns.
She, her pronouns.
Great.
Forgive me.
Thank you.
Hi, Jamie Kennerk, she, they pronouns. I'm the public affairs specialist for the Planned Parenthood Advocacy Project, Los Angeles County, which is the C4 action arm of Planned Parenthood Los Angeles.
Great. Glad for you to join us. Thank you. Lucky Fuller, Lucky Alexander Fuller, also known as published author, and we're going to talk about a little bit about your book. And if you can please introduce yourself and your pronouns.
My name is... Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Lucky Alexander Fuller. I am the founder and CEO of Invisible Men, which is an organization that supports transmasculine individuals, both trans men and non-binary individuals. I'm also the trans wellness advocate for APLA, and I'm happy to be here.
Great. We are happy to have you here. You bring an important perspective. And you failed to mention, and I'll take advantage that I know you and we work together, that you also serve on many boards, and one of them is the City of West Hollywood Transgender Advisory Board. So thank you for your service. All right, so but last and not least, a good friend of the community and personally, Joey Espinosa Hernandez from Gay and Lesbian Center.
Yeah, hello folks. Joey Espinosa Hernandez, pronouns they, them, theirs, and ella, Director of Policy and Community Building with the Los Angeles LGBT Center. For folks who are not familiar with the center, we are the largest provider of LGBTQ services in the world. We have about 10 sites all across LA County, and I have the privilege of working on protecting and expanding the rights of the LGBTQ community, particularly thinking of it through a racial justice and gender justice lens.
And if you can remind us your pronouns.
And my pronouns are they, them, theirs, and ella.
Great. Thank you very much, and I'm glad that you are able to join us tonight. So as I said at the beginning from the discussion, the panel discussion, we are going to talk about, obviously, why we are here, which is Prop 1, and how do we arrive here. I briefly mentioned SCA 1, and for those of you who are present and are at home and are wondering what SCA 1 is, a Senate constitutional amendment, and it started in the Senate because the Senate Pro Tem, Tony Atkins, who represents San Diego, with the support of the Assembly Speaker, the outgoing Assembly Speaker, Anthony Rendon, who also represents, he's a Democrat like Tony Atkins and represents Lakewood, introduced this joint motion in the Senate. And that allows the legislature to place the initiative, which eventually became Prop 1. So the first question, I'm going to ask Jamie, why Prop 1 when we know that California is perhaps one of the most progressive states in the nation, and abortion is not just legal, it's broadly available. People are asking, why do we need a proposition for this?
Yeah, so, I think really in the grand scheme of everything, the elevator pitch of Prop 1 is after the SCOTUS decision happened and Roe v. Wade was rolled back, it is very evident that we can no longer rely on longstanding federal protection. So SCA 10, the bill was really born out of the SCOTUS leak and the stark reality that it was going to use language that says overturn Roe and lead us into this kind of free-for-all state-by-state basis. And so, yes, it is legal in California to have an abortion, which is great. We have been working to expand access in California. We had one of the most comprehensive bill packages in the country passed this year. However, we cannot take anything for granted, and this is the strongest action that we can take right now to continue to strengthen our protections. A state law can be undone easily with another bill, and so by codifying it in the Constitution by a vote of the people and an overwhelmingly supportive vote, hopefully, we will be able to make a very strong statement in California in our Constitution, and it will also be a signal across the country that it is not politically popular to be against abortion rights.
And just to, please go ahead. I was just going to add on to Councilmember Erickson's point earlier. I think also, how does the United States stay as a bastion of human and civil rights for the world? How does also California play that role for the rest of the country? When we see all of these rollback of protections, the implementation of over 25 trigger laws banning abortion in a variety of states, and then like the onslaught of additional bans that are coming through state legislatures and the potential of a federal ban, California has a moral obligation to folks who can become pregnant to stand up and say that this must be the standard for the rest of the country. And how does a constitutional amendment in California set the precedent for a federal constitutional amendment to the right to an abortion?
And I think one of the things that we have to add is there are other states that perhaps were not perceived as progressive as California, which have it already enshrined in their constitutions.
Shout out to Kansas. Yeah.
Exactly. You know where I was headed. Exactly. And the voters, thank you for the shout out to Kansas. Kansas voters rejected any changes. And public opinion is on the side of us, of people who believe that women and people who can get pregnant, including transgender men, should have the right to make that decision by themselves. But I want to go to a community that is disparately affected by access to healthcare, but particularly access to healthcare of good quality. And this is something that when we talk about abortion and we talk about family planning, we talk about healthcare. People that seek an abortion in general talk to their family care practitioner. And for some people, that family care practitioner is a clinic at Planned Parenthood. So in your case, Onyema, I wanted to talk about, which I didn't know until I did the research for today. I had an idea that this could be the case. 40% of the individuals who have an abortion are African American. It is also known that many African Americans suffer the highest mortality, maternal-related mortality rate in the nation. How is your community addressing this issue and involved in making sure that people understand the disparity issue, number one, but also why this right needs to be enshrined in the Constitution?
Yes. Thank you for doing that research. Thank you for bringing this issue to the forefront. You've made a number of different connections that illustrates why it's important for us to fight for this right? As Black folks, as Black birthing people in this community, and as a reproductive justice organization, right, for us, the tenets of reproductive justice are the right to have a child, the right to not have a child, and in the event that we decide to parent or to bring children into this world, that we have the supports necessary to parent our children and to have our families with dignity and respect in sustainable communities. That is what we're talking about. That is the framework that was established by Black women in the 90s, right? And that's what we're talking about. And it's important for me to name those tenets because in this moment where rights have been revoked and repealed, reproductive justice is a sexy term. And I want us to recognize and understand that it is a framework that's been developed. Shout out to Loretta Ross, who just won a huge award right now, because it's a framework that we're working off of. And so based on that framework that's based in human rights and dignity, we talk about the various issues that impact our ability to determine our reproductive destiny. We talk about the intersections and the various issues that impact our lives. You mentioned, right, the importance of, you mentioned the maternal mortality crisis that plagues our community, and I'll just share a few stats with you. In the United States, it has the second highest maternal mortality rate of any developed country, right, or nation. Black women nationwide are 3 to 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than our counterparts. Here in California, stats just came out that said Black birthing people are 4 to 6 times, well, the research says women, right? But Black birthing people are 4 to 6 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than our counterparts. When the leaked draft decision came out, we found out, a research study came out that said that Black birthing people across the United States stand to die. The maternal mortality rates stand to increase by 33% for Black people, for Black birthing people, right? And so our ability to determine whether or not we carry a pregnancy to term has serious implications for our health, right? When it comes to our maternal health, that's directly linked. Recognizing that the maternal mortality crisis within the Black community is not a function of our income, our education level, right? It transcends any of these other markers that impact adverse health outcomes in other communities. So we know that racism, right, access to inequitable access to quality health care, inequitable access to certain resources, economic opportunities really impact, right, our ability to determine our reproductive destinies. And so I appreciate you asking the question so that we can illustrate how since we do not live single issue lives, various factors, systemic inequalities really impact our access to determine our reproductive destinies. So at the very least, we have to fight for the ability to have our reproductive autonomy, which starts with rights. Sorry.
I'm glad you said that, because there are so many things that I will eventually get to piggyback on that, and I know we only have until 8:30. But the first thing that in doing the research, and this applies also to the other communities that are impacted by the decision by the largely white, affluent Supreme Court of the United States, that this issue brings up the repeal of Roe, brings about the issue of class, inclusivity, wealth. And when I hear people who are opposed to abortion, that you should not abort, and this goes to all of you, so feel free to jump, that we will support you. I wonder, are these the same people who are opposed to the forgiveness of loans, the Head Start funding? We do not have universal Head Start funding in this country. In the economic package that was known as the social infrastructure, that did not fly. So when we tell people, and Prasad should be asking questions instead of in my opinion, but I want to hear from you, what do you hear from your communities? And I also want to hear Joey, because this also applies to lesbian and bisexual women who in the community also have higher rates of abortion and even higher rates considering having abortion and then not having it.
Yeah, and I think one thing to name is the political rhetoric that's happening on a national level does not reflect the opinions of the people in America, right? The majority of Americans who are part of the voting bloc support the right to choose.
67% per the Pew Research Foundation.
But do we see the same type of celebration of the right to choose in our country's capital? No, we don't. And we know that this is true across a variety of progressive-leaning issues. I mean, for instance, take into consideration the amount of anti-trans legislation that's happening in state houses across the country. We're seeing over 150 anti-trans legislation introduced in state houses across the country within the last 6 to 8 months. In one of the particular states, the state legislature is really debating about the access of trans girls into sports. In this particular state, there's only about 2 trans students who are trying to access sports.
It's a political soundbite.
But we have this huge national debate about trans folks being able to access sports and other sex-segregated programs. And so this is a tool of the alt-right trying to magnify this and use fear as a tactic to motivate voters into to the polls. And this is frankly disgusting, right? Because we're not centering the priorities and the decisions that our community members are asking for. They are focusing on what can be political rhetoric. And one thing that I want to highlight, particularly around the decision that came out around overturning Roe v. Wade, it was also very clear in the decision that they were absolutely coming for LGBTQ rights as well.
Hold on, because I'm glad that you bring it up.
That's,
I know, but...
You can't get me fired up and then say, hold on.
I have 90 minutes, and I don't want you to run with the entire show by yourself, because there are 3 other people here. And you said something that gives me perfect segue to ask Lucky, because Lucky is the founder of Invisible Men, and so many times Black people, minorities, trans people, trans women, but particularly trans men are invisible. So obviously, great thank you for doing that. But I want you to talk to us about the issue of being a parent or not being a parent, because but you are a parent. So for you, this is personal. Please.
For sure. I think that, yeah, I think it's on. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Great. Transmasculine individuals, whether you identify as trans male or non-binary masculine leaning, often get left out of these conversations around reproductive justice because it's assumed that we exclusively engage in sexual activity with cis women. And for LA County specifically, 84% of transmasculine individuals identify outside of what it looks like to be heterosexual. And so when we look deeper down into that, 83% of those folks are engaging in sexual activity with folks that could result in pregnancy. And without, we already don't have the healthcare that's necessary or competent for us there because of so many assumptions about our being and how we navigate. We don't have adequate health care. We don't have adequate care when it comes to family planning. And so even more so when it comes to abortion, we don't have space to even speak and say, this also affects us too, because we also give birth. On top of that, we have transmasculine individuals who suffer through the highest rate of sexual violence overall. And so at 71%, within this county alone, we've had 71% of our demographic has sustained harm from sexual violence, me being one of them, right? And so all of those things are said to say that we belong in this conversation.
Yeah, and you know, I'm going to, again, take the ball that I stopped Joey from throwing. Joey alluded to the legislations in different state houses, because, as he also mentioned, many believe that and I think Alito, in the opinion that was leaked, alluded to the fact that this was just the beginning of other opinions which would attempt to take away rights from the LGBT community. And the LGBT also is about T and transgender affirmative surgeries, gender affirmative surgeries, and how that could also be taken away. And we know that that has been a hard-fought battle that was won in few states. In other states, not only the practice could become extinct because of the laws that Joey was talking about, but also because it's not widely available already. Can you address that issue?
Yeah, you know, trans folks have been fighting for healthcare rights for some years now. And without adequate healthcare, without comprehensive healthcare, on top of an abortion ban, we're looking at death. We're looking at loss of life here. Because even when we look at the statistics, when it comes to transmasculine individuals, 23% attempt self-abortions. So if you tack on not having adequate health care to begin with, on top of not having access to abortion, that equates to loss of life, period, end of story.
And thank you for mentioning that, because obviously it is horrible, but I think that for people watching us at home that may assume that abortion, particularly in California, is a given, and we know that where California goes, so does the rest of the nation most of the time. The reality is that going back to the alleys and the illegal abortions is a horrible idea. It's a frightening thought. But I want you, Jamie, if you can, to illustrate what happened before Roe, what happened with Roe, and what's our biggest fear?
Yeah, so I think, before I get into my big Debbie Downer, do want to emphasize that the world looks very different than it did before Roe. We have had 50 years of legal abortion that has made it so accessibility looks very different than it did in the 70s. We have medicated abortion now. You can self-manage your abortion at home. You, in a lot of states, can get that through telehealth. You don't even have to go to a physical clinic to get that. And so, yes, banning abortions is not going to get rid of the need for abortions, and there are going to be people who are going back to those really horrific methods to try to end their pregnancy on their own.
Or with an unlicensed practitioner, correct?
Yeah, and so, but I do also want to, it's important that we also destigmatize self-managed abortion and make sure that people know that that is an option, especially in states where it is legal. But yeah, pre-Roe world, there is a really great documentary that a number of different groups have been showing called The Janes. It talks about the Jane Collective, which was a group of women who basically had an underground network where they would connect different folks to, go somewhere, get an abortion provided. They had different doctors that would help them. Then, spoiler alert, it turns out that one of the guys that was helping them was not actually a doctor. He just kind of found out how to do abortions and then taught them how to provide abortions. And so then they actually ended up being able to provide abortions themselves. And the network was discovered, but it was discovered in the time when Roe v. Wade was being decided. And so they actually were able to avoid prison time because by the time their court case had gotten through the process, Roe v. Wade had been decided and abortion had been legalized. So I strongly recommend watching it. It's a wild ride, and it really illustrates a lot of the individual stories of what it looked like for people to try to pursue this care. And it is absolutely a reality that we cannot go back to and that we cannot stand for.
Thank you for that. And I was thinking as Jamie was talking about what could happen, and I keep thinking about 2020 and the elections and how, in many ways, we have the president that we have today because women were angry. In 2018, women also voted and elected an amazing amount of women to office. But in the case of 2020, it was Black women who made it happen. How angry are Black women, and how ready are they to fight? What are you hearing since you are so much on the trenches?
We're ready. We're here. Listen, we are part, just as a reproductive justice organization, we've been ready to fight, as you've alluded to. We are one of the strongest, if not the strongest voting bloc. You can count on our votes because it's about our liberation. It's about our autonomy. We recognize what is on the line, and we recognize that we do not live single issue lives, right? And a lot of these issues lie in our in our leadership, right? And who is in power. And so one of the things you can count on Black women to do is exercise our right to vote, and we are galvanized on the ground. We're doing electoral work in this moment. We have canvassers, shout out to one of them back there, who are on the streets in South LA educating folks, and from what we're hearing, we're ready. We're galvanized, we're ready to vote, we're fired up, because you can't take our rights away from us. Not that easily, not while we're alive, right? Like we have a history of fighting for our liberation, of fighting for our rights, and we will continue in that history. We're part of a coalition. I'm reminded of one example. There was a period where there were these billboards going on, like being put up by anti-choice organizations that said the most dangerous place for a Black baby is inside their mother's womb. I'm not sure if folks remember that campaign, but You remember that. And so like from that was deeply racist. that so many different, horrible undertones. And we created this coalition called Trust Black Women. And that was to illustrate like, you are not going to sit here and disrespect us. We will flex our power and flex our muscle. So we have a history of fighting for our liberation, of using our voice and using our tools that are available to us to determine sort of our destinies. And so part of that is coming out to vote, and we're ready.
It's refreshing to hear that. I'm not surprised. It's also, and when I was preparing to host this forum, it's very difficult not to make the connection that the same organizations that are anti-choice are also anti-marriage equality, anti everything that does not fit one very strict and narrow pattern, which is against diversity, which is against anything that looks different than one particular segment of our society. And because we keep hearing the news, what was the attempt to alter the constitutional transition of power and democracy, it's refreshing to hear that the community, the African American community, and we are talking about here in South LA, is ready to do, which I know, what I imagine at least, is part of a national strategy. And I'm heading to the work that the Gay and Lesbian Center is doing, because obviously, as I said at the beginning as well, this also impacts lesbian women, bisexual women, trans men, and you are also connected to this work. What's the work? Because while the center is based in Los Angeles, it's definitely a national organization, and I would like you to speak and address the issue in terms of legislative efforts. And again, this is not just about abortion, it's also about family planning, the access to healthcare.
Yeah, and to speak a little bit about LGBTQ women. Did I do something wrong? Thank you. To speak about the health disparities that LGBTQ women experience, right? Whether it's teen dating violence, sexual violence, intimate partner violence, abortion access, poverty, etc. All of the different types of negative life outcomes that are connected to the need for abortion, or whatever restricts them from being able to access abortion. LGBTQ women generally do not have the resources or the mechanisms to be able to reach health equity. And particularly in California, only a couple years ago did we finally dedicate resources to LGBTQ women being able to actually to address these health disparities. And we're talking about just within the last few years. And so particularly thinking about how does that have an impact on this national conversation, it's really crucial to really think about abortion as an LGBTQ issue and not separating those things. Talking about how classism and the negative impacts of capitalism is an LGBTQ issue, how poverty is an LGBTQ issue. The reason why we need to name all of these different intersectional points is because the folks who are trying to repeal these rights do not distinguish between us. They are attacking anything that is different than them. And it's crucial to think about what does community and coalition in resisting against the rollback of our protections really look like. And I think on the national level, we have to think about what is a national strategy to queer the vote. What is it that needs to happen in order to be able to address these health disparities, including access to abortion for folks who are able to give birth, particularly for the myriad of LGBTQ folks that need access to reproductive health care. And just thinking about this, as we continue to think about a national strategy on this, we also need a federal constitutional amendment to ensure that everyone has access to an abortion and contraceptive care.
Yeah, and I also, in terms of the snowball effect, because as a queer woman, I like to say that my job leaves me in a constant state of existential crisis, as I'm sure we all relate to. They are coming at us from all sides. It's like birth control, fully on the table. IVF, fully on the table. LGBT marriage, fully on the table, which is such a floor when it comes to LGBT rights, right? Like, we just got the right to work also from the Supreme Court. Like,
right, and also just like potentially repealing Lawrence v. Texas, which...
And explain what Lawrence v. Texas
and
is.
Lawrence v. Texas was a case in Texas that was only in the late 90s that repealed the criminalization of sodomy laws in Texas. Like, we're only talking like...
Basically made sodomy illegal.
So we're talking...
It removed the penal code in Puerto Rico, which was one of the last standing bastions.
Yeah, we're talking about only within the last 20 years was it not illegal to have sex between consenting adults in Texas, and was explicitly named in the decision around the repeal of Roe v. Wade as the next piece that they were going to attack in addition to marriage equality, right? So the pure fact that of eliminating our ability to be sexual beings, to create our own families, and to think that those items could lead us to be criminalized is taking us back even more than 20 years.
I'm going to ask a question, not for the person who's a transgender person on our panel, but from the three of you, what are you and your organizations doing to advance this particular issue with the perspective and the inclusion of transgender people, not just transgender men? Ooh, that was a deep question.
I can start.
And let me explain why I do that, because perhaps it's quite obvious that Lucky would be advocating for his community.
Right. Yes.
But I think we as a community, we have fell short from doing what we need to do for the transgender community in general. Yeah. And that's why if we are going to talk about inclusivity, we obviously need to talk about how we, as non-transgender people, we include transgender and non-binary people in these discussions.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we first should expand it to trans and non-binary folks.
Exactly. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and so, I'll put on my 501c3 hat for a second. I am now Planned Parenthood Los Angeles, Jamie. But within the PPLA health centers, I think something that's important to highlight is Planned Parenthood does not just offer abortions. It is a very small percentage of the services that we provide. We have a clinic in West Hollywood, just up Santa Monica Boulevard. We provide STI testing, birth control, whole range of services. We've given out over 1 million condoms in the last year, PrEP and PEP, and so there's definitely a lot of, community outreach that's happening. Planned Parenthood likes to be very intentional about where health centers are being built and making sure that it is in the communities that need our services, that utilize our services, that historically don't have access to comprehensive health care. It's one of the reasons why PPLA has worked very hard to expand into behavioral health as well. And so really have a belief in holistic care, and all of those services are something that the LGBT community, the trans community, the non-binary community has been shut out historically from. And so, having that intentional outreach, I have a colleague in the audience who can verify that we also do lots of really comprehensive trainings with staff about cultural inclusivity, and making sure that people understand how to give competent care, because so many of the systemic issues that come from healthcare can come from your doctor just simply not believing you, or not understanding your needs. And so there's a lot of outreach and trainings that happen with staff as well to make sure that that is something that is addressed internally. And then switching back to my C4 hat of my advocacy, our conversations, we really want to push the narrative that not just women can become pregnant. I think that that is something, a conversation that has taken over in the conversations about Roe v. Wade. That's where people go first. And so we're very intentional about, having our language say people who can become pregnant and talking to people about why we say that and bringing that conversation to the forefront. And a lot of the panels that we've done around the Roe v. Wade decision, we've also talked about a lot of the deeper implications that it can have in the snowball effect. And so that's why we were very excited for this nice, wonderful intersectional panel that we are having today, because it is very much part of the Planned Parenthood values. So that's my soapbox.
And I'm glad you went into that soapbox, because I'm going to confess that when I was preparing the staff report and resolution in support of Prop 1, I kept talking about women and access to abortion, and it was Councilmember Horvath who sent me an email saying, I think you are missing a big chunk of the population. And I still didn't get it until I went and did the research, and it dawned on me that, yes, of course. So, pardon me. So that, I'm glad you mentioned that. But I wanted to ask the same question that I asked you, because Black Women for Wellness, I would hope also includes transgender women.
Yes. And thank you for that question, because even as we're sitting on this panel, I am listening to you speak and share the stats around sexual violence and assault, and even like I'm thinking about our comprehensive sex ed program called Get Smart Before You Get Sexy. I'm thinking about our advocacy for abortion access, and thinking about, like our conversations and engagement in the work around self-managed abortion, right? And I'm thinking about all the ways that we can do better to be inclusive, because yesterday, as John mentioned, as Councilmember John mentioned, Kamala Harris dropped a lot of gems, and one of the gems that she dropped, VP Harris, dropped a lot of gems, and one of them was the importance of coalition work in advancing our rights, right, and reaching across the aisle. So I'll say, so as we were sitting here, it dawned on me how much I don't know, right? As much as I'm intentional about saying birthing people, and in conversations when I've said that around my advocacy for Prop 1, I've encountered with trans men who have said, thank you, because that inclusion is critical, right? Like that language means something, but I'm ashamed to say that I wasn't aware of the facts, of certain stats, right? That add context to the importance of this access to the rights. So I have a lot of work to do just personally. Black Women for Wellness is a reproductive justice organization, and inherently reproductive justice is queer. We are within our coalitions, within the conversations. So we're part of a Black RJ coalition space. All the Black RJ organizations from across the nation meet and have conversations. When the draft decisions came out, we crafted talking points, and we were intentional about our talking points and our communications being as inclusive as possible. We're intentional about our language being as inclusive as possible, because we recognize that we all don't occupy one identity. We recognize that, and it's critical for us to acknowledge and fight for the dignity of everyone and how everyone shows up. So we do that work, but I recognize that there's more work to do, because yes, there's more work to do, at least.
And I was in preparing for this tonight, I also got some statistics that showed, and this is not shocking, that a majority of women are in favor of abortion to be legal, more than men. But one thing that was not surprising, because I am Latino, I am also Catholic, although non-practicing. I come from...
Catholic like me?
Oh, yes, we're one of the few. But I grew up in a very Catholic country. I'm Argentinian, as many of you know, where women and men in society in general do not ascribe to some of the discourse from the church. And I was pleasantly surprised, perhaps, that Catholic women in the United States also largely support. And I actually wanted to address this, and perhaps this is a bit of a stereotype, but because of you are Hispanic, you're supposed to know about this issue, Joey. But since I don't have any other person perhaps to ask about, unless you have those statistics, what is your read in terms of the community, the Latino community, and the response to the issue of abortion, which in general is believed to be more conservative and not supportive of the abortion issue?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I don't identify as Hispanic, I identify as Latinx, to specifically distinguish between sort of the colonial aspect of that. And I think that we generally operate on the idea that Latinx and Latino communities are more conservative than they actually are. I'm thinking back to the 2020 presidential campaign and really thinking about all of these conversations that were happening at comidas, at churches, at misa, at small dinner parties, and really thinking about how the Latinx and Latino communities are really coming out for progressive causes, and also thinking about abortion. One of the programs that we have at the center is bringing in Latina women to talk about family issues and also to be able to talk about making sure that we're not rejecting our young people because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. And I think Latina women save us. I think they hold up a moral value that makes sense. I think Catholicism and religiosity is playing a smaller and smaller role in the perspective of Latino communities, particularly Latina communities, because I think that there is this progressiveness that is rooted in the oppression of poverty. Latinas and Latina women, and particularly single Latina women who are parents, tend to lean more progressive. And we see that in voting blocks, we see that in different studies. And so I think that we really need to listen to women more. And in this particular case, I think we need to take their example in this work and being able to follow that example of being more progressive, even when there are stereotypes against us for not being that. And I think Catholicism is an inherent part of the Latino experience in America, whether you do identify as Catholic or as a recovering Catholic like myself, or folks of a different religion.
There are many.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that because of the issues of classism and poverty, Latinx communities are transcending the conservatism of religion.
It's a rebellion. It's a resistance to it. Yes, thank you for that. I'm going to invite the few members of the public who are here. If they want to ask a question, we have a mic there. You're welcome to ask a question of the panel. If anybody is interested. If not, I would like to ask you for some final thoughts. Karen Ears, and I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. Thank you, Karen.
You can hear me.
But the people at home may not be able to hear it.
Thank you. So my question is, okay, California is so progressive, and yet we still aren't there when it comes to reproductive justice. There isn't access for everyone, particularly people in remote areas of the state, and particularly for communities of color. And I should also mention there's a huge foster care population in LA County, 30,000 kids in foster care, and how they receive information about reproductive health care is crucial. But my question is, how can Prop 1 and this whole legislative package that's going through the state legislature, how can that help with filling the gaps? Do you see a future where this legislation and Prop 1 will make access better, stronger, and more comprehensive?
Yeah, so I can start with kind of the Prop 1 and the bill package. So starting with Prop 1, like we said, this is the strongest action that we can take right now to codify abortion in California. It is a very simple language. It pretty much just explicitly states that abortion and contraception are inherent in our constitutional right to privacy, names that, so it just codifies existing law. However, it is something where other states are looking at California and seeing how this goes in terms of wanting to pass things in their own states. There is a movement in, I believe, Michigan and Vermont for similar propositions, as we saw the Kansas vote, and then Kentucky has a not good one. It would restrict abortion access that is also being watched right now. And so we need to build on that Kansas momentum. We need to come out as strong as we possibly can to show that California is a beacon when it comes to abortion access, and that this is something that can continue to be modeled. In terms of the legislative package, a couple of cool things to highlight. SB 245, which was authored by Senator Lena Gonzalez in Long Beach, makes it so there's no cost sharing for abortion in private insurance. And so, addressing the financial aspect there were a couple of bills that allocated increased funding for abortion services. There were other bills that protected legal liability, especially in terms of other states trying to prosecute providers in California who are providing abortions to out-of-state patients, making sure that we're not sharing information about patients or providers in those types of cases. And then there was SB 1245, which was authored by Senator Sidney Kamlager, which creates a pilot program in Los Angeles for abortion access, and it also came with a $20 million allocation specifically for LA to really fill in the gaps that the other funding mechanisms were not addressing. Black Women for Wellness was a very incredible partner on the work groups that were really looking at where those holes in coverage and care are and training for staff. And so that's, all of that is being done in strong partnership with LA County. And I'll let you kind of piggyback off of that.
And before you say that,
Yeah.
I have to say that the city of West Hollywood has supported all of those bills,
Yes.
and then some.
Yes.
And that we have a very active Women's Advisory Board. Karen used to be in that board. And I met with them at least 5 or 6 times this year to review those bills among the many that we reviewed and supported.
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Karen. I appreciate you raising the foster youth issue. And we are, as Black Women for Wellness, working coalitions with groups that are securing access to various reproductive health care for foster youth, because since you've raised that, you recognize the very particular and distinct challenges that they have to accessing care. And so we've worked on several bills to address reproductive health care for them. And so we're very much so in those conversations and raise their issues with regard to the abortion access debate, right? Or the abortion access conversation. So let's see, we'll go with the legislative package that was pushed through that were a priority of the California Future of Abortion Council. We, Black Women for Wellness Action Project, is one of the steering committee members, and so we're really honored and are honored to do this work and see 15 bills make their way through the legislative cycle, most of which, 14 of which, right, were signed into law. So yes, that's been great. A lot of them with companion budget asks that were also funded, right? Like a record $200+ million budget, $200+ million budget allocation, was made in the coming budget. So that's great. With regard to funding that's coming to California, SB 1245 that Jamie, you mentioned, a lot of a lot of work was done by the County Board of Supervisors, right, to do background research and talk to different state agencies, community-based organizations to really talk about the gaps, how to best build the infrastructure for the County of Los Angeles to ensure that the funds that are allocated will go to really ensure that equitable access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care is available to various communities. We talked about incarcerated folks. We had meetings with foster youth programs, right? It was one thing that's really that's heartening for me this go around is the centering of equity, the contemplation of just ensuring that everybody has access and equitable access, right? Recognizing that even when Roe was the law of the land, it was just a right in name only. And because of the dearth of reproductive health care providers, right, in rural communities, in communities of color, it wasn't accessible to folks. So that right meant nothing. So in this conversation with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we've really used it as an opportunity to contemplate equity and center communities that haven't had access yet. And that's a critical part of the conversation that's heartening for me. Sorry, I know I'm going long-winded, but I'll say one of the bills that Black Women for Wellness Action Project co-sponsored is AB 2586. It also had a companion budget ask of $15 million. And what that does is fund community-based organizations, right, in the community that advance reproductive justice principles, to do outreach and education and offer resources to the various communities that they serve around, again, the full spectrum of reproductive health care, including abortion access. And so community-based organizations that cater to foster youth, community-based organizations that cater to Black folks, community-based organizations that might cater to trans folks, right, have access to this funding or can apply for this funding so that they're able to and supported with providing this outreach and education to the communities they serve as trusted messenger, right? And the key to that is the education must be medically accurate, culturally competent, all of that. So that's some of the work and some of the funding that's going to that. And sorry for
No.
all of that.
This is why we are here. And you were talking about the Senator Kamlager's bill. And I couldn't help to think that not only the author is a woman, but you talk about the Board of Supervisors doing the work. And for those of us who are not 27 like you, well, I'm 54, I remember a very different county Board of Supervisors where there were no 5 women, where they were conservative members of the Board of Supervisors. And I can tell you that doing the work that I've been doing for the City of West Hollywood for 21 years now, is day and night the progressiveness and the amount of decisions that have been made and actions have been taken in a very short time, because these 5 women majority, even though one of them is a moderate Republican, I would call, have been very active and very progressive in making things happen, not just when it comes to healthcare and reproductive rights, and rent stabilization, for instance, in housing and in incorporated areas, in mobile home parks. So it's really noticeable, the difference. And obviously, I guess the slogan that elections have consequences is true, I would say, always. And this is why we are here, and this is why this year all of us who care and vote will have an opportunity to do so. And I would like to wrap up this with very brief final thoughts from each of you, particularly how is your organization spreading the word about the importance of Prop 1, how you are reaching to your community. And with that, we will just end tonight's discussion. So, Lucky, I don't know if you would like to start.
I think one of the most important things that our organization does is spread awareness. and let folks know that we are also birth givers. I am a grandfather today. Okay, I have 3 grands, 4
pictures.
children.
Names?
Huh?
Names of the kids?
Oh no, I can't do that.
Pictures later? No.
I've got plenty of pictures, but you know, as a father that has given birth, that has also dealt with sexual violence, that has also dealt with just being trans and the way that the world treats me, it's very necessary that we're not left out of this conversation, because leaving us out equals erasure. Erasure equals loss of life.
Thank you, Lucky.
Yeah, I think one thing I kind of, want to briefly touch on that I didn't get to in a previous question is, when we're talking about abortion, there are so many reasons why people decide to obtain an abortion. It could be economic reasons. It could be something going on in the relationship. One of the things that terrifies me so much right now with what we're seeing in states where they are banning abortions is even when it says there's an exception for medical necessity, the line that is drawn with when that is determined. There are a lot of medical professionals who are scared to provide an abortion until the person is very genuinely possibly going to die from their pregnancy, or it's a pregnancy that is absolutely non-viable, that they will not terminate until it gets to that point. And so as we are doing this work, it is very important that we do everything we can to destigmatize, that we say abortion. I have t-shirts for people that would like them. And in terms of, outreach for Prop 1, one of the biggest things with this campaign is we know that Californians support the right to an abortion. What we need to do is to make sure that our supporters know that this is on the ballot, that they gotta go to page 5 out of 6, as it was for me after all the judges and everything, that you need to get to the propositions, you need to vote yes, you need to turn in your ballot, that we need to have overwhelming support for this proposition, that it is a very simple proposition. There's a lot of misinformation that the opposition is trying to put out to confuse people, and we need to counter those narratives, and that there are lots of text banks that are happening. There are lots of things that I'm happy to plug people into. The more we can get the word out, the better. And so that is my call to action for everyone.
And before I pass it on to you, I forgot to say, and I have to say that Lucky is a published author now, and he did not ask me to do this. I asked him to bring the book, so it's my responsibility for plugging in. I wanted to mention because as someone who likes to write as well, and who likes to put words together, I know what an accomplishment is to do this. So he's going to be posting on his Facebook page when the book signing will be happening. So thank you for sharing this with me. I'm going to give it back because I know it's your wife's copy. You can give it to him now. I don't want to walk away with the book. So
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. So the question was what we're doing to spread awareness around Prop 1. So Black Women for Wellness and Black Women for Wellness Action Project, of course, proudly endorses Prop 1. And so we have a civic engagement program and a civic engagement team that's comprised of canvassers, phone bankers, text bankers. And so we are deploying all of them within our community to spread awareness, because it is in fact an awareness campaign. Once folks find out about Prop 1, they are all for it and excited about voting for it. And so building awareness within our community is one of the, is what we're focused on. One of the ways we're doing that is through our field team. Another way that we're doing that is hosting community forums. So last week on Friday, we have a program called Sisters at 8, right? And so usually it was in person pre-pandemic, but it's a virtual conversation where we invite folks to learn, right? We have conversations about hot topics, and this past Friday was about the propositions. And so we had a forum where folks could come and ask questions, right, in a safe space about the propositions, and Prop 1 was, of course, one of the ones that we talked about. We actually are putting out a voter guide, and so both a 501c3 and a 501c4 compliant voter guide. The 501c4 one talks about our positions on the various propositions as well as our endorsements. But we, again, explain our positions and disseminate those widely. It's one that our community asks about. And so that's another way that we're out. Another thing we're focused on is talking to folks outside of our silos. And so before this, I spoke at one of our partners' events, Courage California. They're a social justice organization, right? But not necessarily reproductive justice. And so they're not reproductive justice or rights or anything, right? And so cross collaborations like that, talking to other social justice organizations and their audiences, right, about why this is important and why this is an issue that impacts their communities and impacts folks who are fighting for those rights, is how we do it. So we do cross coalition community building as well.
So we just issued our, I don't know how I figured it out.
At the end of the panel, I'm glad you did.
It's the power of activism. So we just issued our voter guide, an LGBTQ voter guide for the midterm elections, which you can find at lalgbtcenter.org/vote, which the first position we have on there is yes on Prop 1. We're doing a variety of public education workshops and trainings for folks, a lot of LGBTQ folks across LA County and across the state. We're also doing text banking, phone banking, door-to-door canvassing to make sure that we get low propensity voters to turn out for the midterm elections. But I think one of the most crucial things that we're doing is abortion is not always considered an LGBTQ issue. And there's a lot of members of the LGBTQ community that can't give birth. And so we have a responsibility to educate all of our LGBTQ community members that this is an issue that impacts us. And so we take very seriously what does allyship actually look like. Allyship is not passive. It is an act of resistance against the systems of oppression that push down on folks who need access to abortion care. And so that's one of the main things that we're extremely focused on, is making sure that all of the LGBT community understands that abortion is an LGBTQ issue.
Thank you very much. And I have to say that GLAAD has a great resource for journalists, for hosts, in doing exactly what you were talking about, which obviously abortion is an LGBTQ plus issue.
Before we close up, I have a final plug that I forgot.
Absolutely. It's free, go for it.
The most important plug, I can't believe I forgot it, if you are interested, especially for the folks watching online, on learning how you can get involved with the campaign, go to yesonOneCA.com, and they have activist toolkits. They have things you can post on social media, frequently asked questions. You can individually or as an organization endorse the proposition, just everything you could need, kind of a one-stop shop. And so I encourage everyone in this room to go, again, yesonOneCA.com, and the Planned Parenthood Advocacy Project, LA County Action Fund did also do a voter guide. If you Google Planned Parenthood Advocacy Project, it will pop up. Our link is too long for me to say it. And you can find those recommendations there as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucky. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Onyema, for being here. Thank you, Joey, for taking the time. And thank you to all of you for being here. And if you are watching us from home, thank you for joining us. And until next time, I'm Hernan Molina, Governmental Affairs Liaison for the City of West Hollywood. Have a good night.